is Face Diaspora, a platform for conversations on Eritrea. Your host, Wissam Mesfin. On September 11, 2001, a cataclysmic tragedy struck the United States in a brazen attack masterminded by the notorious terrorist Osama bin Laden.
United 93, do you still hear Cleveland? United 93, United 903, do you hear Cleveland? United 93, United 93, Cleveland. United 93, United 93, do you hear Cleveland Center?
Do you see any activity on your right side, smoke or anything like that?
As America recovered from its wounds, the world community expressed horror.
We are here in the middle hour of our grief. So many have suffered so great a loss, and today we express our nation's sorrow. We come before God to pray for the missing and the dead, and for those who love them.
More than 6,500 miles away, another nation's leader could not have found a better time to put behind bars the highest members of his government, crushing its thriving private press and holding to prison its reporters.
እዚ ድምፂ ሓፋሽ ኤርትራ እዩ ሰላምታ ናይ በጻሕኩም ዝኸበርኩም ሰማዕቲ ንሎሚ ሰሉስ 18 መስከረም ዜናን ጸብጻብን ነቕርበልኩም ጋዜጣታት ብሕቲ ሕጊ ሃገርን ሕጊ ፕረስን ብምጽራረምን ብሕጊ ንኽሰርሓ ንዝተዋህበን ተደጋጋሚ መዘኻኸርን ዕድልን ብምንጻገን ካብ ሎሚ 18 መስከረም 2001 ጀሚረን ንግዚኡ ደው ንኽብላ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ወሲኑላ ሰላም ከመይ ትኾኑ ክቡራት ተኸታተልትና እዚ ካብ ኣስመራ ዝፍኖ ድምፂ ሓፋሽ ኤርትራ እዩ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ልዕሊ ልኡላውነት ጸጥታን ድሕነትን ሃገር ክፍጸም ንዝጸንሐ ከቢድ ገበን ማዕጋቲ ክገብረሉ ጀሚሩ ኣሎ መንግስቲ ነዚ ኣብ ልዕሊ ሃገርን ህዝብን ክፍጸም ዝጸንሐ ዕንወት ንነዊሕ ግዜ ብኽብ ዝበለ ትዕግስትን ነፍሰ ምግታእን ክከታተሎ ጸኒሑ እዩ
The news was stunning, though not totally unexpected. 6 of the foremost leaders of Eritrea's reform movement, who were also previously high-ranking members of the government and military, were arrested at their homes at 6 o'clock this morning. On the list was Petros, who had held several of the top government posts. Also Haile Woldensai, the former trade and industry minister, Mohammed Sharifo, the former head of local government, and 3 former top generals.
Taken into custody by government security forces in the wee hours of September 18 were members of the so-called G15, including Petros Solomon. Since Aster Johannes, Petros' wife, happened to be in the U.S. at the time, their 2 boys, aged 12 and 10, and 4-year-old daughter were cared for by their grandmother and other family members. The political instability, coupled with the erratic behavior of the regime, prevented Aster from returning to her country. However, the more she stayed in the U.S., the more she wanted to be with her kids. Finally, she decided to return home, but only after she was promised by Eritrea's ambassador to the U.S., Asmarino, that she would not be subjected to the same fate as that of her husband. The promise was soon broken. Much to the shock and sadness of the children eagerly anticipating their mother's arrival, she too disappeared into the dungeons of the PFDJ without so much as a family reunion for a nanosecond. One of the siblings was 4-year-old Meaza. Now 17, Meaza has grown into a dynamic high school student who is planning to pursue her studies in college next year. Hi, Meaza. Just want to welcome you to the program and thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, let me start with this letter that you wrote to both of your parents that apparently generated a lot of reaction from a whole lot of people. Were you surprised by the response?
Yes, very surprised. I think I was surprised to see that something so intimate and dear to me was also dear to so many other people in the world.
Was it also, in a way, comforting for you to know that so many people empathized with your situation?
Absolutely. All the encouragement definitely helps me in my day-to-day life, looking back and seeing that I have so much support.
Have you also, during this whole time, heard from anyone who might have a family member also in jail in Eritrea at this time? Have you had any contacts with anyone who said hello?
The only contacts I've had are Ibu, when I read his letter, as well as the people who went with me to the UN conference, but I believe that's about it.
Were you able to read the reaction, all of it? Did you even have time to do it? Because you're actually in the middle of a very busy senior year.
Yes, to be honest, I haven't. I think the Facebook messages that I've read, I've tried to reply to and share my gratitude, but I haven't read the responses otherwise.
Meaza, I know this is a difficult question, and by all means, please feel free not to answer if you don't want to answer. But I just want you, if you do not mind at all, to take us back to the moment when your mother was expected to return from the United States. I have a feeling you remember that date, right?
I don't. I wasn't there personally to pick up my mother. A few of my aunts and my oldest brother went, but I have no detailed recollection of that night.
So you happen to know something is wrong. Is it at school? Is it in the family whispers? Where do you happen to learn about the fact that your father was not where he was supposed to be, at home with you after work, and that your mother was also expected to return from the U.S.? When do you know these things?
Growing up, I got letters and birthday presents, and I was always told they were from mom and dad. But then as I got older, I started questioning the fact that they never came to visit, or that their calls came fewer and far in between. And there were the occasional rumors at school, but when I'd come home, my family would always ease my worries, so I never paid mind to them. When I was around 11 years old, I finally decided to look up a proper answer for myself, and that's when I officially, without a doubt, knew where mom and dad were.
Meaza, can you share the nature of these rumors and just give us an example of a typical rumor that you heard, and where it was and when, and what you did about that?
One of the most prominent memories I have of one of the rumors that stuck was my teacher, I think my 5th grade teacher. I had stepped out of the class to go to the bathroom for a moment, or I don't recall what, but she had told the class my parents were in jail and that I wasn't to know. But I believe the general message, although it wasn't said explicitly, was I am to be pitied or looked at differently. But when I came back into the classroom, no one said anything to me. But later on that day, my friends shared this concern with me, and they asked me if it was true. And I shrugged it off. I denied it. But when I went home and I told my grandmother about it, she seemed deeply upset by it. And that's one of the very first memories I have of other people voicing their suspicions.
Well, so did you go back and ask the teacher about this, and that your parents actually gave you a different information? Or did the teacher attempt to explain anything at all about this?
No, the teacher never said this directly to my face or anything. She did it behind my back, which I don't, to this day, I don't really quite understand what she was trying to accomplish, but I never talked to my teachers about it. It would have been out of place. in some sense.
Well, Meaza, when you look back, if you could actually look back to those days, do you remember the difference in the attitude of your peers before they became aware of this and after they became aware of this? Did you notice a difference in their posture, in their attitude, in their relationship with you?
I'm not sure if everyone knew the case before I did, but a lot of people I know had always been quick to tell me that their parents were friends of my parents or something of the sort, or to question me extensively about where my parents were and when they came and what they bought me. From my peers, I don't remember very much. I don't really remember anybody coming up to me and trying to act all different because of my parents. I think either they didn't know or they knew not to say anything, because I had made a considerable amount of good relationships in my school. I'd like to think that I think people generally respected me enough to not poke their nose into business they knew was not theirs.
So, Meaza, you are now aware that something is wrong with the picture. Do you remember the time that you became aware? Who told you that information, and what was your reaction like when you heard this?
I looked it up, and I was devastated. I was crying on my way home. I had printed out the piece of paper that told me about mom and dad. And as I was walking home, my sister kind of explained to me what happened in the best way that she thought an 11-year-old would be able to understand. And that's when I first found out.
Do you remember how that impacted your life in terms of how you viewed your life, your happiness, your interactions again with your family, with your classmates, with your neighbors, your appetite for food, to sleep, to love? How did that impact you as a human being, as an 11-year-old girl?
One of the things that stood out to me about that talk that I had with my sister is when I think I said something along the lines of, why doesn't anyone do anything about this? And I don't know how she answered, but I know that at a certain point when she told me that it had been slightly foolish to print out the piece of paper, and when I asked why, she said, well, people might be out to hurt you. And I said, I'm 11. What could they possibly do to me? And she said, well, maybe not you, but now that your brothers are of age, there are ways that people could get to them. And even though they might make it seem like it comes from somewhere else, they would have extra reason to hate on or antagonize my family or my siblings. So that's something that stood out to me, is I realized that a lot of the times in my life when it felt like, I don't know how quite to phrase it, but it made me look at my actions differently, because I realized that what I do doesn't only affect me, but it affects those around me and those I hold to my heart dearly.
Meaza, does it make a tad of a difference, just a tiny difference, to know that your parents might not be actually the only people who happen to be incarcerated? Were you aware of that? And did it make any difference whatsoever from your views?
I was, actually, because I also knew a classmate of mine whose father was in jail as well. And it was so odd because I had been going to school with this person for so long and I had no inkling of what was actually going on behind the scenes. And like, we never explicitly talked or formed a greater friendship, but to me, it was just comforting to know that I wasn't the only one. Even though it was a really bad tragedy, it felt like there was someone else that could relate to me at the end of the day.
Let's move on to a time when you leave the country. When did you become aware that you're actually leaving the country? What were you told was happening at that time when you're actually leaving the house and you're packing? Where were you headed as far as you were concerned?
When we were all packing, at first I was told it was a surprise. So no one wanted to share with me where we were going. But as I kept insistently asking, my grandmother told me we were going to Massawa, and everyone kind of played along with it. I knew that we weren't going to be coming back home when on the bus to Tesane, a friend who had helped us out said to my grandmother,
which translates into what in English?
Roughly, you will see your kids soon, I told them.
Which makes you feel what now? So what are you learning now?
Well, in my head, I was thinking that makes no sense. All of her children are not in Eritrea. So I thought, oh, so this is why we split up. We being my grandmother and me took a different path than my three siblings would, because it would be far less suspicious for us to be going down to Tesane than it would be for them. It clicked in my head that we weren't just taking another trip for a week or two to Massawa, but I say it clicked, but I was rather in denial about it. I remember spending the whole trip down thinking about all the different ways I was going to yell at my siblings for not telling me
the truth.
Yeah.
Well,
so that's what I remember.
What did you ask them? Where is Massawa? Did you remember when you confronted them?
I'd been to Massawa before, so it was something I was familiar with. But I never confronted them because over the years that we were separated, I realized that their decision was very logical, and I probably would have been tempted to tell the people I considered my close friends, and they would think it was safe to tell their parents, and then the cycle would continue until it ended up on the wrong ears.
Well, not to mention that it would have been very, very painful, very difficult, and then they were trying to be very protective of you, so you understand that, right?
Yes, I do.
Absolutely. So then, tell me, can you walk us through then you're apparently going through what country?
We went through Sudan into Ethiopia and then to Boston.
So are there buses and trains and planes, of course, from Sudan to Ethiopia, right?
We took a bus to Tesane.
Okay.
We walked across the border into Sudan.
Okay.
I think we caught a car ride from Sudan into Ethiopia.
Was this, if you remember at all, was this a difficult journey, or you're just very curious, you're going through all these cultures and different people, different language, different countries now? What was that like? Do you even remember anything about this time?
I do. Well, first off, walking across the border, it was pitch black. Well, pitch black, but we had moonlight. And there were 7 or I think 5 other people that were walking with us, but they weren't other citizens who were crossing the border. They were all men or boys, I suppose, who do this often. And for some reason, all of them were accompanying me and my grandmother across the border. I remember at a certain point, we were split up because they felt it was necessary. I don't know. For some reason, we were being too slow. So they thought it would motivate one of us if I was up front and my grandmother was behind me. during the trip, to me, there wasn't much conversation. I'm sure we were all in our own train of thought. But my grandmother, Natsala'a, and everything else that she didn't want to let go of, she kind of had to wear on her body because that's what they told us. It didn't matter that we had about 4 bags on our person. They told us we're leaving everything here because we have to walk for 7 hours. It's really, really bright, beautiful Natsala that she had just had made because she was leaving the country, she was entering something beautiful, and she thought she might need her best clothes, and she refused to part with it. And I remember at a certain point, I was walking ahead and I looked back, and I remember seeing bits and pieces of her clothing being left as if she was leaving a trail because they were too bright to see in the darkness. And she was arguing with the boys that were walking with her because she didn't want to leave anything else behind. And I remember being told not to sit down. Your muscles kind of tense up and it hurts to move a little bit. So they tell you not to sit down, to stand up. We walked for a very long time in silence, and I remember at a certain point I asked one of the boys that seemed like he was the leader how he knew where he was going, and he pointed to a flashlight really far away in the distance that seemed to be pointed up at the sky, and he told me that that was Sudan, and that was his compass in a sense. That's what he was trying to go to. We walked through these thorny bushes for a little while, and I remember having to duck down and cover my eyes so that I didn't get any thorns in my eyes. And I remember being very worried about how my grandmother would get through it. She was wearing a dress, so it wasn't the easiest task in the world. When we got across to the Sudanese border, they made a phone call to our contact at the time to let them know that we had gotten across the border. And my grandmother didn't seem to have a care in the world because she spoke so loud, and all of them were trying to shush her, and she just put her hand in their face like, "Shh, I'm on the phone here." And I found myself chuckling.
Well, so you're traveling exclusively at night, I'm assuming. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Only at night?
Yes. It only took one day, but it was a 7-hour walk. Okay.
Are you eating food? Are they feeding you? Who is feeding you? And what are you guys eating at this time? How do you subsist?
We didn't eat anything or drink what you'd consider healthy. Actually, right before the trip, one of the boys asked us for money, and he went into the store and he bought about 4 bottles of Coke. Like a 2-liter bottle? No. 2 liters are the big ones, the small little bottles of Coke. And that's what we shared amongst all of us. That's what we drank the whole way there. I don't know why we chose Coke, but that's what we got.
So you finally arrive in Ethiopia, and then what happened? Where do you go from Ethiopia?
Well, we're there for a while our paperwork is getting settled, and then it comes down to where do you want to go. And because my aunt Elil was one of the aunts that I had grown up with as a child and I remembered very well, I decided to go to her. So that's how we ended up in Boston.
In Boston. So any recollections about your first impressions upon landing in America, in Boston?
It was so much bigger than I expected it to be. Walking around the airport, I felt like every step I was taking was wrong and that I was going in the wrong direction, or I had missed some sign that told me where to go. When I came downstairs, and I think I walked out the door once trying to look for my aunt, and I was hit by this wave of cold air. It made me shiver. They told us to dress up, but I had a small little jacket that I considered was warm clothing. Everything was overshadowed by me seeing my aunt after so long.
I'm assuming everybody got excited and they were very happy to see you. And
Did they have a party celebrating your arrival?
No, but there was that whole movie scene where I run up to my aunt and she hugs me and there's smiles and tears of joy.
Meaza, you also appeared on a TV program with your grandmother. Is it a bit overwhelming or maybe even uncomfortable to talk to the media and having to discuss painful situations?
To a certain extent, yes. I think it's somewhat daunting, if you will. But at the end of the day, I think the cause is more important than my momentary discomfort. And so my only concern in interviews or speeches is that I know what I'm talking about and I represent the cause very well.
So as a senior student now in America, are you able to make sense? Have you read a book or books or talked to people trying to make sense of what's happening in our country at this time?
I'm an avid reader, but I haven't read anything that talks about our country so far. I haven't been able to get my hands on a few books that I have in mind, but they're on my list. What I've made, well, my conclusions so far come from the extensive conversations I've had with my grandmother and my brothers and sister and my aunts. And I suppose to me, in a very simplistic kind of way, it just comes down to people being power hungry and not necessarily seeing the positive side in change or being scared of what they don't know.
Well, so how do you, as a student, go about your day, your daily life? Are there difficult days? And how do you stay focused on your studies?
There are difficult days. There are times when the cause feels a little bit, I don't want to use hopeless, but for lack of a better word, when it feels a little bit hopeless. But then I come home and I see so much support coming from so many people who read my letters as well as my family, and that gives me hope. And I think I've developed a sense of optimism over the years that kind of allows me to look at things positively, and it's just a matter of perspective for my studies, for example, just realizing that now I'm in a place where I have an opportunity to make something of myself and I should take that opportunity.
How is it like to go to school in America?
It's different, but I don't quite know how to describe it. I think the most prominent difference about schools here versus schools back home is the endless opportunities you have. It's really just a place where you can find yourself and figure out who you want to be and which path you want to take and how you want to take that path. So I think that's the biggest difference, is realizing how many opportunities you have and trying to figure out how to take advantage of them fully.
So Meaza, can you actually share with us your typical day? Do you like school or it's a chore?
Well, I mean, I am a teenager, so to a certain extent, there are days when I don't want to go to school. But for the most part, I definitely like going to school. I think it's a good place to spend your time as well as learn. Especially this year, I like it because I'm taking my day-to-day life. When I wake up, I'll wake up around the morning, around 6. School starts at 8:10. First period, I have psychology, and then I have French, and then I have marine biology, and then I have STARS. And STARS stands for Student Teaching and Advocating for Respect. Classes basically range from social science, in a sense, to language, to biology, to kind of activism or community activism, if you will. So I definitely like going to school.
Meaza, does anyone at school, say your teachers or your peers, know about the situation in Eritrea and specifically about your family?
Well, because this is such a cause dear to me and critical to me as a person in my life, I don't normally go around telling everyone. I tell my closest friends because I think they deserve to know. And I've told a couple teachers, because it's come up in conversations about life in general and countries. And for example, I took a modern world history class last year, and I talked to my teacher extensively about the situation back home, so she knows. So yeah, certain people know, but it's not necessarily something I tell everyone right off the bat.
Are they supportive of you?
Yes. Well, I think it's kind of shocking to see me in a different type of light after they've known me for so long, but they're definitely supportive. And for the most part, the reaction I've gotten is curiosity, and people want to know more.
By the way, I should also ask you about whether or not you have received, or your family for that matter, any contacts, phone calls, or any communication either on the government side or on the opposition side. Have you received any communication whatsoever?
No, not to my knowledge.
When we talked the other day, I think maybe it was a week or 2 weeks ago, we were having a conversation, and you said, and actually I was the one who said, I think that we will not have a conversation as if you were running for office, and you said, not yet. And I thought that was very interesting. So can you do me a favor and actually explain what you meant by not yet?
Well, the plan, hoping it goes accordingly, is to make myself a very well-rounded and educated human being so that eventually I can follow mom and dad's footsteps and go back home and implement some change.
Do you think this came about, do you think you became motivated to have this kind of vision because of the situation back in Eritrea at this time?
Oh, well, absolutely. I think that plays a critical part in my life. So, yes. I think, like I said before, it's such a central part of me and my childhood that I think somewhere along the way it kind of clicked. And recently I'd been sort of struggling with the idea of taking on this role, but now I think as college is right around the corner, it's starting to become more of a reality that I want to explore.
Well, so understandably, other than the release of your own parents and all those people in jail at this time, what would you like to see happen in Eritrea? What are some of the things that you wish would happen in Eritrea?
Well, I think we have a pretty great, country. I think sea-wise, we have good resources. It's just a matter of being able to use them properly. So besides making it a democratic country, I think there's a lot of business that could flourish back home, and it would just be a matter of tapping into other resources and making that happen.
Unfortunately, there are also Eritreans whose parents happen to be in jail, whose family members also happen to be in jail. You seem to have been very strong and able to go about your school and your life in a very strong manner. Do you have any message to these people who are going through the same experience? What would you say to them? Do you have any suggestions on how to cope with this, with what is a very unpleasant experience?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say that I'm not the best example because I myself struggle with this day to day. So I'm strong because I have such an amazing support system like my family. But to anybody else, I just say it's very, very hard. I know firsthand, but at the same time, it's really important to keep a perspective in mind and just keep the bigger picture and try to see that the world is very big, but at the same time, it's your world too. You can make a difference in it.
Do you, incidentally, maintain a journal because you would like to record things and maybe write a book?
I do keep a journal. I've kept a journal since as long as I can remember, even when I was back home. If I think at a certain point in my life when I grow old and I get to go back home, I would like to put all my journals side by side and see how my handwriting went from horrendous to slightly better. I keep journals. My sister has encouraged me to do so my entire life because my mother used to encourage her. So I still have a journal to this day, and I plan on keeping a journal for the rest of my life.
One of the things that one has to use to communicate with other people is this Twitter and Facebook business. Are you actively participating in conversations with your peers using these platforms?
I think I'm a bit of a socialite. I like social media, definitely. I use Facebook now more for messaging reasons than I do anything else. And I use my Twitter as sort of an escape to look at pictures of the world or hot topics or things like that. But yeah, I use social media.
Do you think, in a way, this Facebook and Twitter, do you think it prevents one from interacting with somebody in person because you're so consumed and spending so much time with people who are not even near you?
Well, I think that's a double-edged sword because, in a sense, I use my Facebook a lot to contact friends that are all over the world now. But on the other hand, when I come home and I'm talking to someone in Canada as opposed to right next to me, I do feel slightly guilty. But I think it's just a matter of management because it can enable you to reach parts of the world that you wouldn't otherwise. But at the same time, you're doing good things on Facebook. It's not always just kind of messaging that person across the room from you. But I don't think it necessarily keeps you from talking to the people around you because when you have a conversation, you're going to want to put your phone down. At least that's how it is for me.
Go to any place and then I see everybody pretty much looking at a screen and I wonder, when do they get to talk to each other? I see that so much these days.
I've thought that myself. I'm not really sure because I'm on both sides of the line, I guess you could say. Because if I'm sitting somewhere and I'm alone, I'll turn to my phone. But at the same time, I also recognize when it's time to put my phone down and talk to someone else. I don't know. I think it's a matter of prioritizing what you want to do.
Could you please, because so many people could benefit from your experience, and is there any message you would like to convey to any Eritrean, anywhere in the world, who might have one or more family members, especially parents? What would you say to them? What should they do, and how should they be the way you've handled yourself as far as your education, your pursuit of a college for next year? What would you say to these folks?
I would say just because we're out of the country doesn't mean we've forgotten our home. I'd say it's a day-by-day process. Taking baby steps is key, but most importantly, I'd say that we're going home one day. And so what kind of home we go to is up to us.
Okay, Meaza, then can you try saying what you just said in Tigrinya so that people could actually hear from you in our language?
Something along the lines of نزخلو إيرتراوي دلاي فتري أبوت حجر دقمت صباح نكهو حبيرنا عدنا خمنو ملس وعلى عابي تسواي نسيو مالختي.
Fair enough. So we're actually getting to the final part of the interview. I think you've been wonderful and very cooperative, and I really appreciate this conversation with you in the middle of what has been a very busy year for you. If you had a conversation with the leaders in Eritrea, say even the president of Eritrea, what would you say to them or to the president himself?
Wow, okay. Well, at this point in life, I would say that I'm not going to waste any more energy hating you, but I would very much love for you to finally grow up and realize that there's a lot of turmoil in your world and we're not progressing to where we should be, and you should step down and let someone who has a brighter future in mind take over.
By the way, what you just said, Meaza, is consistent with what your father had previously made about letting the future generation, a new generation of Eritreans, assume the leadership of the country. And I actually would like you at this time, if at all possible, I happen to know that you speak Tigrinya. Can you share that, translate that very comment into Tigrinya, actually, so that other folks would be able to hear exactly what you said? It does not have to be a literal translation.
ኢሳያስ አፈወርቂ ተድዛረቦ ነረ ጽልአይ ገዲፈል ካየም በልኮ ህዝቢ እሳቀይ ዘሎ ከም ፕሬዚደንት መጠንሲ ንህዝቢ ሃስ ከተሳቀየኩም ካን ክትፍትን ዘለካ ንሕና ምእንታን ጽቡቕ ህይወት ክህልወና ብኽብረትካ ተትወርድ ንበልኮ.
Again, before we say goodbye to you, I want you to do something very, very important and dear, which is I would also like you to take this opportunity in the possibility that your parents might actually listen to this conversation. Do you have anything you would like to say at this time, Meaza?
Well, I suppose I'd say I love you, Mom and Dad. And we're all being very strong for you. So stay strong, because we'll see each other soon.
I'm actually speechless. Well, so I just want to conclude this conversation by thanking you from the bottom of my heart for taking this precious time in your life to talk with us. I would like also to convey to you that I am absolutely proud of you, as we all are. I want you to be very successful and get straight A's, not A minus, not B plus. You are expected to get A pluses across the board. And I also want to reassure you that things are going to get better for your family and for Eritrean families. Thank you so much, Meaza.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking your time to talk to me today.
Have a wonderful year and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Take care, Meaza.
Bye.
Bye.
نفيقكم سدراي يسنك بنلو نفوق سدرا بيتي نفق علقو نفوق سدرا بيتي أمنا نفيقكم سدراي أبيت زفكركم سدراي مفكركم وحدكم اترفت فليكم كلكم كوازنا فيكم لساني يقلصوني أحيت لبي زبلكم أحيت منيتي حسابي أحيت كتوني تفقكم أحيت عدي سفكركي روحي مفكرك واك وحدكي اترفت فليكي مساي كلكم كوازنا فيكي لساني يقلصوني لبي زبلكي أحيت منيتي حسابي أحيت كتوني تفحكي أحيت ولا عادي طيبه أو فغري من الأغمرك لأخت فطاري عم كل بغي وكيان صناي فغري تكباراتي فرلوه بحري كندي مسكر تحت وفكبدغي كندي مغري تلقس لسانكي كندي صنعات تزنتو شمطغي كندي حبن كفر محتصنكي كندي تزفات عدل هيوتكي كتهبي لو فكيرون عخي لساني يقلتوني تلبي زبلكا يديت منيتي حسابي كنتني تفاكا بزح زفكركم ولا دي فغر كواك وحداكم ترفري حيغاكم كلاكم باوك ازي تسماكم لساني يقلتوني تلبي زبلكم منيتي حسابي كنتني تفاكم كبار لي فبراك ولدي ما هوتي مرحت من قدي كله حلفي وإلكمني أأمنكم لما بزبتكمني زواهل القوة مبتعلني والتقغنكم كبعني فأمانا يتعرفون كحزني صلاتكم ودروا يفليني مرقني مرقا ولادي كبرها الليلة هوت من قدي فقورة دعوتي نبرانا يجزنا زعلفنا يلهي ودنا في غي زي كون بين اللوني بيحكي من الرجال لقو حالاتكم فقركم لساني غي انتاي تخون لكم دكاي مفقر داقي وحداكم اترفت فليكم أبحق فوي كلهم زنفغاكم ولي بتافت النوم تبهي لا تدميكم هاي حب ولاي نفقر تديكم هاي علني جزي نفقد تسن فني مخال سنو كل تنكينكا هاتي القغيد متني كمشا مدحراي بعيني قريعكم سدراي نفق اللقوم حسب اللقوم أقوم فقرات سدراي كي تشكروا كي يحمقكم نبرا كي يتصقم أنا خلقوا أبعالم نفسي رحقوا أحي قطعلو أحي قلبي باقوم أحي تقازي ولو أحي لبي مساقوم أحي يواك حلو أحي باقي مساقوم أحي أسافي ولو أحي علني قزي نفق التسن فني مخال سأنو كل تنقينكا هاتي القغيدة متني كمشا مدحراي بعيني قريئكم سدراي نفق اللقوم حسب اللقوم أقوم فقرات سدراي كي تشكروا كي يحمقكم نبرا كي يهلو تسقم أنا خلقوا أبزحاني نفسي